hardly any. It turns out there's no break and change, because you wouldn't have any code like this already, even if you had the deconstruction.
Right.
Why not have some sort of a tilde in front of it, or something that makes it, more like a destructor type?
So this is important. It is not a destructor.
Sure, but it's something I'm just saying something similar.
If you did it something similar to a destructor, which is really a finalizer, then you would be doing something related to that. This is very clear. We are doing deconstruction here. We are not doing destruction. By the way, in Java, this is called a destructor. Okay? And it was there before Microsoft had a deconstructor. So there is a language out there that has already come up with a term, and they called it a destructor.
That's a really bad one.
And Microsoft said, no, let's stop the madness. Let's do it with the actual true English word. We're going to call it a deconstructor in spite of the fact that it's changing the standard from another language. And that was an explicit, not an implicit choice. It was a careful decision, and I can assure you I've been part of many threads discussing this minor point.
I upvoted because destruct really does. That's the tone.
Right, the destruct is about destroying, restoring memory, not destroying memory.
That's where I was
Restoring
confused at the
memory.
beginning.
This is about deconstructing an object into its constituent parts. Yes?
When would you want to deconstruct versus just reference the public properties of the object?
Both are totally possible. Both are totally possible. This gives you a syntax for doing it 1 second in one method, but remember, I can just call deconstruct. If you don't like this, do a dot deconstruct. It just works.
Think of it, so sometimes you've got yourself a lambda where you really want a subset very consistently. You quickly have that deconstructor there for that purpose instead of having to go and have 3 assignments or do a tuple assignment or whatever.
So I'm going to keep going because we're going to be out of time. I don't know what time you guys end. I was planning midnight, but I hear that that's not. I have to do this talk again tomorrow night in Seattle. I know you guys will show up because I've been so excited. And I got a plane after that, and so that case I do have a limit. But tonight I'm staying overnight, so we got this thing. Okay. What is the Alt-Shift enter? There we go. I can't remember the keyboard shortcut. Okay. I have a palindrome function here. What is special about this function? Can you guys see it? You have a function inside it. Think what language? JavaScript, right? JavaScript. I am now declaring a function within a function, or what we call a nested function. Is this something I could have done in C# 6.0? Not the syntax, but the same functionality. Is there anything here that I couldn't have done in C# 6?
Yeah, you could have done a delegate.
I could have done a delegate. That is 100% correct. This is exactly the same if I'd gone ahead and written a delegate. Or an expression. I guess I'm sort of trying to use slightly more modern language. But I could have done this with an expression. Could I have moved the function outside so it's no longer nested, and would it give me the same functionality? Would everything be the same if I did that?
No, because that's scope.
Exactly right. By nesting, by the way, I'm very impressed. By nesting a function within a function, I am now declaring a function that is only callable from within the function which is nested. Okay? And it turns out in this specific case, that's a good thing because it is never valid to call internal is palindrome except from this method that goes and first checks for is null or white space. So I've actually declared a function here. I've limited the scope so I make sure that it is always called with a check first. And if I put it outside, it would never be valid unless I check first. Yes?
Do you have, like in JavaScript, access to variables from the parent?
Yes.
Okay.
The scoping rules are what you would expect them to be. So basically what this says is, I no longer need to have classes. I can do everything with functions. Just kidding.
So you really didn't have to call it with text and have the string target.
That's correct. That's correct. Sorry.
Interesting.
Good point. Other questions about this? Yes.
They have that in Scala. They call it inner function. You can use it to do recursion.
Yes, this is exactly what I'm doing right here, right? I'm using recursion, and it's called a nested function, which is closed. And it really, I mean, just so we're clear, Scala, it turns out, is not quite as popular as JavaScript. This was done for JavaScript. Okay, next feature. This is an important thing. I'm going to show you a feature. Before I show you, let me make one clear programming guideline. If you can use polymorphism, do not use this feature. Okay? Everybody knows what polymorphism is, right? We had a bunch of people talk about interviews and go and start. Polymorphism, standard interview question, what do you need? You need a base class, it needs to have the same signature, and then I can go ahead and pass different types that both have the same base class or interface. If you can use polymorphism, do not use this feature. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is not a good use of it if you can use polymorphism. So, let's imagine that I have storage, and we've got a DVD, a hard drive, and a floppy drive, and a USB drive, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, I can go ahead and say int question mark, if number is int. What's different about my is int question here? I am declaring a variable at the same time that I'm checking. This line is saving me 2 to 3 lines of code that I had before. When I used as or is, I had to go check the data type, then declare the variable and assign it, then go start using it. I'm doing that all in one statement. I both check the data type, and I go ahead and declare a variable, and I go ahead and assign that variable. Wrong keyboard.
What if you had, if number is in 5.5, could it fail then?
Then it would not pass because it wouldn't be an int.
You wouldn't assign it, it would go on. It would fail if.
Yes, yeah. The if condition wouldn't be set, and the variable would not be set. Int would not be set. In this case, it would throw an exception. I can also use the check for null. So is storage null? I can go ahead and do that. And if it is, I can go ahead and instantiate it. That's not very exciting.
Why is null instead of equals null?
Yeah,
You can use equals null.
question mark.
Both work. What happens here, you'll notice, let me move down a little bit further right there. I am not only checking for the data type, I am also assigning a variable and calling, or actually checking, or looking for a filter. In the same way we did in C# 6.0 with exceptions. C# 6.0 supports the ability to put filter criteria on your exceptions, just like VB did in version 1.0. And that was very important to you guys. Okay, so here I check the data type, I assign a variable, I check whether the variable has particular quantities or not. I mean, I can check whether it doesn't have to be with the variable, I just happen to be using the variable. And if it is true, I then, in this case, go ahead and unload the USB. So I now have the ability to declare a variable, assign the variable, check a filter condition, and if the filter condition is met, then I can continue to execute the code that's inside this block. And in this case, I do the same thing with DVD, but why not, boring, why not go ahead and do a switch statement? Now what's really, there's a couple interesting characteristics about the switch statement.
Wow.
First of all,
where's the Scala come?
This is it.
Okay. We should all just throw away C# and switch to Scala. I can tell, you know, Scala's had it the whole time, so why do we think it's like? So, by the way, I see a bunch of you taking notes and taking pictures. This is all available on GitHub, and I'll give you guys the URL at the end. That doesn't mean you can't use it, but it's all unit tested, and you can go through it and look. And so notes are totally available. As you can tell, I don't take slides. So, okay, you can still take pictures, especially of me. I know that would be great. Okay, so a couple things to note about this switch statement. First of all, the data type is no longer limited to something that can be expressed as a literal.
Right.
I am using storage, which is not a string, it's not an int, it is a storage type. Okay, so that's a significant change. Secondly, because I'm now supporting filters on my case statements, order matters, which was not true before. Order didn't matter. You could go ahead and put your default case first if you wanted. Most of us didn't, thank goodness, because it's a little unclear when you do, but it was supported. But now, because order matters, you need to go ahead and put the case statements because of the fact that you got filters. Now, if you do something like null, it's not going to matter. You can put the null part of this anywhere. Okay? And you can actually put the default part of it anyway. But at the end of the day, order matters.
So the data types cannot derive from the same, or how does it work? Like
If you use, so the question is, do the data types have to derive from the same thing? Yes, absolutely, all the time, 100%, but they could be derived from object.
No, the question is more like, will this test pass if I have for the case USB key, if I have another
Oh, yeah, no.
data type derived from that
No, if
one?
I go ahead and use int here, that's not going to be allowed because it's not a compatible type.
No, but if my
It means a
storage
subtype. It's a
variable
subtype of USB key.
is derived from
USB key 2.0.
USB key.
Super USB key.
Okay. I think I understand the question. The data type of each of the case statements must be type compatible with inheritance from the types you had before. Essentially, so for those of you who know C# 6.0, this is do what you did in C# 6.0 with exceptions. Right? They all had to derive from exceptions, and the order mattered with which you did it, but once you had filter statements, the filter statements would matter. This is exactly the same thing as what we did with C# 6.0 and exceptions. We're doing this now with the switch statement, but now it's not specific to exceptions. Yes, to the back.
You can't tell if your if code in your case code, your switch code, is going to execute identical. On your if code, if the USB key is not plugged in, you would then test for DVD. Right? Case code, I can't tell if it will just fall out of the case or check the others.
So I don't know if we're identical, just because I can't remember. We can go back and look.
So your if code said if USB key and it's plugged in.
Yes.
Right? And then it's an else if DVD.
Yes.
Right? So if it wasn't plugged in, but it was a USB key, it would fall out.
It would fall out.
Right?
Correct.
Well, no, but actually check for DVD, then check for hard drive, right? So check each of the other else cases. But this one looks like it's possible that it would just check the first case and not try the other cases. Is that true?
No. So if it is a USB key but is not plugged in, I'm going to hit the default.
It'll check to see if it's a DVD next.
You actually would have tried the other if cases.
It will.
This case will. It's going to try the DVD case. It's going to fail.
Okay.
Then it's going to go and try the hard drive case. It's going to fail. So I
So
should have
it won't
jumped
immediately
it.
jump to it. It won't decide
No,
that the first part of
no.
that
It's going to
statement-
evaluate each case statement. It's going to evaluate them in order.
Statement.
Obviously, fairly quickly in this case.
So in other words, partial matches are just another case. You could have another one that says
Yeah, I
case
could-
USB key.
Not
and
plugged in, no
when-
problem.
Right.
And it don't have to use USB. I could say, and the time is blah. It's a filter just like you did it with
So the when
exceptions.
clause is part of that case statement. It's not an after the case is chosen statement.
It is evaluating each criteria in order. If the first one passes, it goes on to the next one.
As a single,
As a
is
single,
it
Yes.
So what I'm getting here is the when clause is your actual filter.
The when clause is a filter, that's correct.
Instead of the and.
Yeah, instead of what you had to do before, right? You hit the USB key. Let's imagine I declared the variable inside here. I'd have to put an if statement. If the USB key is plugged in, but then I would have actually caught the case, and there's no way to jump to the next one. Oh bummer, that's not where you want to want it now. How do I go to the next one? I can't. Right? There's no way to sort of jump to the other case because I'm already inside. I've already broken the switch. So in this case, what allows us to go ahead and skip that switch statement and not fall into the case statement and then not know how to get out again and use one of the other conditions.
So it's perfectly possible to write underneath case USB key, another case USB key without that.
Absolutely.
clause.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you have a case within a case that will act as a filter?
Can you have a case
The
within a
first
case?
Instead of saying when USB is plugged in, say.
No, that would just be then if then statements.
Something else.
You would, once you've broken into the key statement, you could put another switch statement. But if it's a nested, you've got to. If you put a case within here, you're going to have another switch statement.
Okay.
Yes. So this is pattern matching, and it's people argue is tuples better or is pattern matching better? And what I would say is this version of pattern matching, as we have it so far, is somewhat not all the way there. And so we'll see future versions of the language where we start to take this to the next level. This is sort of testing the waters, verifying we got it right, but there's stuff to come that's much more exciting. Yes?
I can tell you from Scala, pattern matching is very powerful.
Yes, I agree, but I don't think in C#7 yet we have it to all the capabilities that you'd want.
We won't hold that against you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. But if you want it to be that way, it's open source. Go ahead and modify it. Okay, couple quick things. We now have expression-bodied members for the stuff that we didn't have in 6. So you can now do expression-bodied methods for your get, for your set, for your deconstructors. So that's some new features there, nothing too exciting. You can do throw expressions. So this wasn't possible before. Go away. This wasn't possible before. Even though we checked the parameter, we're checking it for null, we couldn't go and throw the argument because a throw expression didn't exist. You had to write a throw statement. And therefore we couldn't do expression-bodied members. We had to go ahead and do a full statement. Now that throw can be used as an expression, we can do something like this. Here's an interesting one. Imagine that you want to write an asynchronous method. And it turns out when the buffer comes in that you're going to go ahead and search, if the buffer is 0, you want to escape as fast as you possibly can. But because an asynchronous method required me to turn a task, I had to instantiate a task in order to go ahead and return and short circuit the method, which was a kind of a slow operation at the time that I want to be fast as I possibly could. And so now we've gone ahead and coded a value task. Now, what this is saying two things. First of all, we've got the ability to short circuit and return a value task that is not expensive, doesn't require me to do a bunch of underlying operating system threading stuff. That's cool. What's also interesting is it now allows me to create custom types that return from asynchronous methods. I'm no longer restricted to void, task, and task of T. However, I think it's fairly unlikely that you will come up with a type that you actually want to code this for. So I think this is a very rare scenario. It turns out it is possible, you could do it, but it's very unlikely. Okay, so we've got that. Next, and you got to bear with me in explaining this code. Let's imagine that I pass a method a photograph. And what I want this method to do is return to me the first pixel that has red eye in it. Okay? I'll return the first pixel that has red eye. And what I'm going to do is when that method returns, I'm going to go ahead and change that red eye to be black. That one pixel, that red eye to be black. Well, when that method returns, it's going to return some kind of index operator or some kind of identification of the pixel. But I'm then going to have to reiterate into the array to go find the pixel that you happen to do. And if it's a really big thing, I'm sort of, doing a whole bunch of memory stuff that I didn't want to do. What I really would like is the ability to return by reference. And if I return by reference, I can assign the return a new value and set it to black instead of red. And so what we have in C#7 is the ability to go ahead and return by reference, as identified here. I pass in an array. I go ahead and search for the first red eye pixel that's red. I go ahead and return a reference to that particular one, and then I simply go ahead and assign it, and here's the code that's invoking the method. So here you'll notice, return by ref, here's the syntax, ref, and then I go ahead and assign red pixel the color black. Probably not used by anyone all the time, but if you're doing a lot of unmanaged stuff, this is really important. Yes?
Is it mandatory to throw exception at the end, or it's possible to return null?
The question is, can you return a null reference? And you can no. So you have to return something from the array that was passed in. Good question. For example, I can't in this method return a variable that I instantiated here. So if I went ahead and declared an int inside this method, I can't, a byte inside this method, I can't return that byte because that byte is on the stack. And you have to go and return something that was passed in order to go do this. Yes?
Can you use a tuple where the first value?
You cannot return a tuple because it's a ref. It's a by ref on a value type.
Yeah, value type.
Yes.
Can that be async?
Yes. I can't see any reason why I would. The answer is yes. Okay. A couple. This is not available, so I'm just going to touch on this topic just because of time. You can in C# 7.1, which is experimental, right? You can now use default without using the parentheses. So here I can say default, just say default. I don't have to say default value task of long. So we can do things like async on main methods. So here's a main method. It's got a value task that's being returned. It's async, and you can go ahead and start to do that. And we started to get into a world of new features. So a couple things to note. Essentially, what started to happen is that there are some quick wins that have started that Microsoft has started to code because it's open source. And instead of you having to download the compiler, we're starting to see sort of 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, quick release features, small amount of stuff, but you can get it if you want to upgrade to that. And so far it's been planned out through 7.3, and then we're working on 8. So that's sort of the 3 that are there. This is highly experimental. Almost, it's not quite downloading from NuGet, downloading from GitHub, but we're sort of closely approaching that. And features like this are fairly easy wins. Like that's not a big deal, default or async.